Meanwhile, of course, pensioners are having their benefits slashed. They're having their benefits cut. They don't get any winter fuel allowance anymore, and they could now be about to suffer yet another blow under Rachel Reeves' plan to raid ISAs and to basically change the rules on ISAs and make it possible or impossible to put too much money into them. Georgie Frost is here, editor-at-large of the Times Money Mentor. Georgie Frost, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. It seems to me that there's a couple of different stories going around about cash ISAs, because the Daily Mail's claiming that they've won a victory, that she won't be reducing the cash ISA allowance from 20,000 to 4,000. But what's the truth of it?
So the truth of it is, I don't know if you noticed, Mike, that the government need a bit of money, and they really want to get growth. Yeah, they really want to get growth going. So this is actually something I've argued on Talk before. Is one way to do that is we have a huge amount of money in savings. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying the government go with their dirty little grubby fingers and take it all out. Right. But if we could encourage people to invest some of that, then it would be good for the economy. Arguably, it could be good for individuals because, of course, over time and past performance and all that is not indicative of future gain. However, over time, investing for the long term has shown that your money does work harder for you. It could be good for businesses as well if we can encourage them to invest in the UK economy. So a couple of weeks ago, the Chancellor gave a speech in the city, and city execs were encouraging her to do more about cash ISAs. Fidelity, one of those sort of finance fund managers, as it were, have suggested that if you reduce it to £4,000, currently you can put £20,000 in a year, tax-free, then you could encourage people to invest that money. So look, it's in theory quite a win, except for everybody who likes cash ISAs, right, and particularly older people who, you know, I wouldn't really encourage anyone who's in their 80s to sort of look at investing. It really is a long-term game, as I said, but also it's formed part of people's plank of financial planning. And it feels like, especially with the inheritance tax changes coming in 2027 to pensions being included in inheritance tax, that it feels a little bit like the rug has been pulled under people who've carefully planned their latter years. Look, as I would say, we have almost 300 billion in cash ISAs. We have I think it's about 30 billion in premium bonds, all tax-free, all in cash that could be put to better work. So the government want to do that. But
presumably it's money that will eventually be spent in the economy, won't it? I mean, people aren't saving up for no reason. Presumably they're saving up because eventually they're going to do something with the money.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Look, everyone saves for different reasons. I would suggest if you're older, you would do it for emergencies, you do it perhaps for care. And I would say that, everybody should have that emergency cash buffer. And cash ISAs are a really good way to do that because, of course, any gains that you make on it, income tax, dividend tax, if it's a stocks and shares ISA or capital gains, is tax-free. Another element to this is it's costing the government, and I wonder whether this is just a prelude to the government. They really don't like ISAs generally because it's costing them about 6.7 billion a year in tax relief. That's money that they could be spending elsewhere. My concern with this, though, is that what people are going to be doing is, rather than, if the limit is slashed to 4,000 from 20, as I said, rather than spending that money investing in the UK stock market, which is what they want them to do, to invest the money, what they're probably just more likely to do is put it into an average savings account, and they might be taxed on because you are taxed on your savings income above a certain amount. Right. That would be the concern. My other just caveat to this is, I would say 20,000 is very generous, and only about 10% of people ever max it out. And when ISAs first came about 26 years ago, for the first 10 years of their life, you could only put £7,000 in, and of that, 3,000 could go into cash. So it's not like this is completely unheard of. However, my big concern, as I said, is it pulls the rug from people, especially in their latter years, for their financial planning. And I don't think the government is doing anywhere near enough to encourage people to think that the economy is stable, that they are happy not to have this enormous amount of money in an emergency buffer fund, which is what people are doing, to then invest it in the UK. And I think the first 6 months, don't get me wrong, this is no criticism, this is not saying that the Conservative Party didn't hand them a bit of a hospital pass with the economy. However, for the first 6 months of their tenure, it's been talking down the economy, which has been absolutely rubbish for everybody. And I would suggest that they start changing their tune, start educating people
and I mean,
more.
there'll be people listening to this going, well, a chance would be a fine thing. If I had any savings, I'd love to put them into something that was going to make them tax-free. But a lot of people actually don't really have any savings at the moment because they haven't got any spare cash. But the other thing about putting it into the markets and putting it into sort of, you know, companies to try and get some kind of growth going is that it's not as safe as putting it in an ISA. The reason people like ISAs is because you put the money in there and you know it's going to be there when you go back for it. Whereas if you start putting money into, you know, FTSE 500 companies or whatever, you know, it doesn't always work out the same way.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Look, to be clear, you can put money, you can cash ISA, there's stocks and shares, there's an innovative finance and a lifetime ISA, right? But the main two, I suppose, is a stocks and shares. So you can invest in a stocks and shares ISA and you can have cash in a cash ISA, right? So just to be clear about that. But yes, there is greater risk. I think one of the big reasons that people put money in a cash ISA is because they aren't aware, there's lots of research say, they aren't aware of the impact of inflation eroding their cash. So over time, and investing is for the long term, which is why this story is really around older people who like putting their money in cash ISAs rather than investing. It's what's advised for people to do as they get into their latter years because of the risk with investing. But over time, it's shown to sort of the lumps and bumps, as it were, in investing shown to even out, and your money can grow more than it would in a cash ISA. But the problem for older people or anyone who needs access to that money, which is why having a set lump sum, they recommend 3 to 6 months of your outgoings in an emergency savings pot, is so useful, is that should the stock market go down, as we've seen plenty of times, and you need that money quickly, I'm afraid you could crystallise your losses. So that's the concern. But over the long term, as I said, money can work harder. And for individuals, it would be good, especially if you're young, you've got a long-term horizon, to be looking and considering investing and seeing if it's right for you. And one of the other myths is that you don't have enough money. You can start a very sort of simple cash stocks and shares ISA for as little as sort of £25 a month. So, you know, look, I'm not advocating any of these cash ISA or stocks and shares ISA. Anything I would say, if you don't know what to do, speak to a financial advisor. But I would just say consider it.
Interesting. Great. Good to talk to you, Georgie. Nice to see you again. Editor-at-Large Times, a money mentor, of course. You can find her in the Times every single day.